Hi folks, welcome to Wednesday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast stroke videocast. We've once again got Jimmy in his mobile studio.
Woohoo.
And Stuart Lockhead's with us as well. I'm
good.
Norrie Stewart. We're going to cover, I think quite quickly today, we'll be covering Nicola Sturgeon's press conference. Wednesday, of course, means PMQs. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, also made a statement today. There's been a couple of interesting blogs. Pete Wishart had a pop at, wrote a blog which was then attacked, I think it would be fair to say, by both wings and Peter A. Bell. So he had a pop at them on Twitter. And Henry McLeish has a piece in The National that seems to have caught our imaginations a bit. But we'll kick off with Nicola. Anything interesting today, Stuart? You watched it all.
Well, I watched the first 20 minutes of her statement yesterday about the Christmas stuff, and she was, But today was, she kind of outlined it, but the thing I would highlight is there is no perfect outcome in a pandemic. She's really not, she spent half the time saying, okay, we've relaxed the rules for Christmas, but don't do it. Stay in. Go for a walk. Don't have a Christmas dinner. I'm not having a Christmas dinner. And don't call your mum and dad elderly.
I do think that she's been consistent with that. Okay, there's going to be relaxed rules, but that doesn't mean to say you need to relax. If you want to keep Granny safe, don't have Christmas dinner with her.
You think she's just trying to distance herself with a decision that clearly not really hers, it's Boris's.
I think she got outvoted.
She's trying to make sure that Boris gets the blame. She can say, oh, I was bounced into it.
Well,
I think you're good. I think you're right, Jimmy. She just, that's what she's very good at the communication, much better than Boris.
Tell me, guys, I didn't see her press today. Did anybody ask her about yesterday's announcement on levels? No, obviously not.
Not today.
Not today, no.
This was about East Lothian, but not Mid Lothian.
I'm raging at her decision to keep Edinburgh in Tier 3. I think she's a disgrace. Edinburgh is nowhere near the threshold to be in Tier 3. The cases in Edinburgh, the city of Edinburgh, are dropping. And there is not a hint of having the balls to come out and say, well, we're keeping you in Tier 3 because we can that the wages will travel. Which is exactly what she's doing. She's just not got the nuts to say it. And I'm amazed. Frankly, I'm amazed that none of the journalists asked her the question. You know, they set up these thresholds only a few weeks ago. So why completely disregard them?
Well, she did say 3 weeks.
The
other point is with Midlothian, with Midlothian going up a threshold, it would have been really difficult to bring Edinburgh down one.
Well, Midlothian didn't go up; they just didn't come down.
Well, it would have been difficult to bring Edinburgh down with Midlothian not coming down.
But
our numbers are going down. Midlothian's increased in the last week. Yeah, well, look, our numbers have been consistently going down for the last 4 weeks.
Well, I mean, Jimmy, the figures today support what you're saying, because today Glasgow was what, 260, Lanarkshire 190, Grampian 132, Lothian 94. So Lothian is consistently steady or dropping.
Yeah,
and how many of those are West Lothian?
West Lothian's a different area.
That's a good question.
That's what I'm saying, Norrie. They only give you the figures for Lothian, so they drag us down. Then you look at the city of Edinburgh figures, and they've been consistently going down.
And it must make a huge difference to. I mean, if people are trying not to leave the city of Edinburgh, we run into West Lothian, or we run out to Dalkeith, they're affecting your business, Jimmy. Yeah.
Our business is gone anyway, mate. Seriously, my cousin posted a series of photos in Edinburgh city centre this afternoon of deserted streets. I'm looking now. I'm sat right in the middle of town. There's not a lot of people about. I'm scared them on to submission now.
Can I annoy you a bit more? Jason Leach was on today, so he said your best protection is your front door. That's all right. But then he was asked about football because Neil Doncaster's been up on pontificating. Said, "Oh, what about England?" And you know, all the only response to that was, "Well, no sector is in isolation." And it's not every sector in England where there are different regions. In some places, just football. Did they not?
I'd actually congratulate the Scottish government for that, in that the London government is far more susceptible to pressure than Edinburgh has proved to be. Even with football, and not just football, you know what I mean, but all sectors, they've been far more susceptible to pressure. They've allowed pubs to do things that Edinburgh have said, no, that's not happening, and they've stuck by it. London consistently have set rules and then broken them when they've come under pressure for the lobbyists.
I must admit, I find this argument, the 10 o'clock curfew, changing it to 11 o'clock and all the kind of rubbish around that. What difference does it make? You're in a pub, you know what time it's going to close, and you get your carry out.
The only difference it makes, mate, is giving pubs an extra hour's income, because you're guaranteed they're not calling last orders at 10 o'clock and then letting people sit there for an hour nursing their drink. That doesn't happen in any pub anywhere.
No, it doesn't. You're out. I think a trick's been missed here. I mean, both Jason Leach and Nicola Sturgeon do it by saying, look, this is about keeping people apart. But the Westminster government hasn't taken that line. I don't think I've ever heard Boris Johnson say that. And I think when people realise that, you know, it's not about shutting your pub. It's about you not mixing with people, be that in a pub or wherever. Well,
I'd venture to suggest, I seen a tweet, I can't remember who from today, a guy who clearly works in a pub, and he said he felt far safer working in a pub given all the safety measures they'd put in place than he does sitting on a bus or going around to a supermarket.
Well, he's not been in the pub trade long, Jimmy, because I'll tell you, one of the least safe places to work in the world is a pub.
COVID safe, mate.
I wasn't happy. I took a look at the new Aldi in Leith. Oh, that is definitely not COVID safe. Narrow aisles.
I see Aldi are delivering through Deliveroo now.
Yeah, but
I'd like, guess that's what I said. I noticed that I said something on social media about that. I wouldn't mind that, you know, just for God.
I'll tell you what, Stuart, they've got a rare bottle of spiced rum at 12.5 quid, mate. It's well worth a butcher's just for that.
Oh, I'd go for that, aye. I might even swing by and put my mask on and pick it up. 12 quid for a bottle of spiced rum. Oh, yeah.
Aye, and it goes down a treat, mate.
Could we sum up the Nicola's press conference as it's all about Christmas?
Oh, it was all about Christmas, yes. In fact, it got so bad. The detail was some wag asked questions about, well, you were handing out advice about your cutlery if you were going to a barbecue in the summer. So should you take your own cutlery and your own cups to Christmas dinner?
There is a list of recommendations that suggest everybody should take their own cutlery and plates.
Yeah, but should a politician be handing out advice like that? No.
No, I was more worried about, I seen a picture and I was more worried about the stylist. I thought they'd been styled by somebody for Imperial Rome. Nicola was wearing purple, the dais was purple, the fat bird behind her doing the sign language was wearing purple and all.
Jimmy, have you noticed my curtains and my back wall?
Are they purple too?
I hadn't. Is everybody getting delusions of imperialism here?
I got married in a purple suit.
Yeah, but that was way back before Victoria was queen.
That was 1970.
I bet you had bigger sideburns than bloody Jimmy Savile back then, mate.
I had very long hair.
I'm not sure I would accept that. I don't
like the Jimmy Savile one, but I had very long hair, that's for sure.
Okay, PMQs today.
Yes, tell us.
The very first question, I didn't get the guy's name, but was, will the UK be leaving Europe as all four countries as the UK? I have no idea where that came from. but it was a Tory MP who obviously doesn't understand how the UK works. But there you go. But to get to the meat of it, Keir Starmer went on domestic abuse, which took me aside until he twisted it rather neatly into a question about Priti Patel and bullying. And then asked how many ministers who'd committed to the ministerial code had kept their promises.
Well, it is International Action Against Violence on Women Day today, mate. So that's probably why Keir went on domestic abuse and then twisted it.
Well done then. Well done then.
I thought Keir did quite well because he had 4 bullet points, and it was like the four main topic reasons for, you know, he was talking about the ministerial code. The guy who wrote the foreword to that was who? Boris Johnson. And the 4 bullet points were bullying, no leaking, no misuse of of taxpayers' money, and no conflict of interest. And he went through, I won't go into the details, but he went through each one.
And effectively, that's what the question was about. But he asked the question before he gave the answer, which was very lawyerly of him. I thought he played it really quite well, because everything that the ministerial code is built around has been thrown to the dogs by this government. I mean, effectively, most of his cabinet should resign.
Well, what this cabinet and this government shows is that responsibility is now very much back out of fashion. Nobody takes responsibility for anything, and they can say whatever they want, and they're never going to be held accountable for it.
I think it's just more barefaced in this government. The Tories this last 10, 11 years have effectively thrown traditional responsibility out the window. Nobody resigns about anything now.
That's true. Just moving forward, one on the rank, chaps.
Oh, no problem. If you get another fare, good. We were lucky. A good luck charm for you yesterday, weren't we?
Aye, exactly. That wee boy was stood beside the window for about 5 minutes having a fag. I thought, who's this weirdo? And then he tapped the window. Will you take me to the airport? Of course I will.
Of course I will.
Certainly, sir. You're not weird at all.
Look, I thought watching PMQs that don't forget, it was a virtual PMQs, and he was sat in his room, and I'm sure he had an auto cue and 2 advisors behind the camera and notes, and yet he still started slowing down. And
he really didn't try to hide the fact he was using his notes. Every time a Tory MP asked a place question, he had the figures at his fingertips.
He had his script sitting in front of him.
So it must have been written down, because Boris can't had figures in his head.
I didn't see that much of it, but I did hear the speaker reprimanding him again.
Yeah.
He said, this is not the leader of the opposition's question time, this is Prime Minister's question time.
Well, there wasn't a single question asked by a Tory MP today that wasn't set up for him to quote some detail that made his government look good. Ian Blackford went on the international, what do they call it? I can't remember. The charitable giving.
International aid.
International aid at 0.7%, which Rishi Sunak, well, we can kind of mix them up if you don't mind, but Rishi Sunak announced half an hour later was being cut to 0.5%.
Yeah, so that was well trailed, wasn't it?
Well, that's where the $4 billion for the extra defence spending's coming from.
Well, it's a nice bit of red meat to all those racists who hate the fact that Britain, or who actually think that we fund other countries, instead of international aid primarily being about stopping people dying through poverty.
Well, I was a bit surprised that he didn't take his second question as an opportunity to ask about the disaster of devolution, but he stuck with the international aid point. He wasn't too bad this week. He didn't prattle on too long.
I thought he'd be keeping his head well done.
But apart from that, apparently they're going to plant 30,000 hectares of trees. I don't know where they're going to plant them in Scotland, but Scotland is the only place that plants trees, apparently. We need to find 30,000 hectares. to help the Tories keep a promise.
Well, every promise they've made on planting, they've broken. So I wouldn't worry about that one.
Well, the only thing, as I say, that stood out to me was the fact that every Tory MP asked a question that was planted to make Boris look like he knew what he was talking about.
That would tend to suggest that whoever's replaced Dominic as his scriptwriter was actually quite efficient.
You would think, but it'll be interesting to see when he goes non-virtual again next week.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. This was his last time.
Yeah.
To do this, unless he comes up with another excuse to do it this afternoon.
Well, I could see it being set up so that he has a page of answers to make him look like he's a details man.
What did he bother?
Well, he's put an effort in today.
But I mean, having staged questions from your backbenchers and having the answers ready, I mean, that's probably been the case for 200 years,
Yeah, but it used to be one, possibly two. It was never every single question.
Yeah, now it's every second question because of the format as well.
I think, to be totally fair, I think there was one question that wasn't teed up for him to talk about how great his government was. But there was more Tories asking questions because of the numbers they've got in the House. Moving on then, unless somebody's got something else to say about that. The highlights that I picked out from the Chancellor's statement, let's go. Economic contraction of 11%.
Mm-hmm.
By the fourth quarter of 2022, they hope to be back to levels before the pandemic, which weren't great. 91.9% of GDP.
Aye, we're borrowing. Mm-hmm.
And then it was just a list of numbers.
That's all he done the day was chuck some red meat to the Tories. But numbers, basically bullshit baffles brains. He was out there trying to look nice and shiny and to convince the Tory party to vote for him when Boris finally goes.
Well, we eventually got to the meat of the matter, which is an unemployment is expected to reach over 2.5 million.
Aye.
Private sector wages are down 1%. Gosh, what do you think that was a prelude to? Telling us that public sector wages are up 5%.
I'd love to know where he got that figure. I can't think of anybody in the public sector that's had a decent increase this year apart from MPs.
Well, the fact that his greedy Tory business-owning pals aren't going to pay a decent wage to their workers means he can't justify across-the-board increases for public sector workers.
Yeah, but think about it. Where does this figure, of the cut to private sector wages come from? Is that because the government is subsidising so many people that work with furlough money?
No, what they'll have done is they'll have taken the number of people working before the pandemic, the total amount of money they earned, divided that amount by the number of people working. They'll now have taken the furlough amount of money, which is 20% less, by the number of people who were working then and divided it again. I mean, private sector wages are not going to go up because there's so much unemployment.
You're right. It's cover for slashing people or hammering people at the bottom end. I know he came out with some nonsense that we're going to do this for the living wage and the 20% who are learning the least that's all nonsense. That's all windy dressing. Well, the reality is there's going to be an attack on workers and an attack on wages, and that always affects the poorest, the worst.
Well, I have never, ever heard a Tory chancellor say, well, the public sector are actually getting paid better than the private sector are getting paid more than the public sector, so we'll have to put up public sector wages.
Aye, that's never happened in history, has it?
And the first person that used this particular ploy was, guess who? Maggie Thatcher. The private sector are having a hard time because I've shut down all the the pits and all the steel mills and everything. So I'm afraid the public sector are going to have a hard time too.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. If you shut down if you denationalise all the public, they're all public sector jobs that you were getting rid of anyway back then. Now what?
Oh, they'd privatised most of it by then. They tried privatising it first.
I think it was a nonsense today. As I say, I think it was electioneering on the off chance that Boris does go. And he played to every sector of the party. He played to the wets, although there's not very many of them in the parliamentary party, but there's still quite a lot of like almost middle of the road Tories out there. So he played a wee bit to them by talking about how he's going to help the nurses and how he's going to help people who are struggling. And he played to the right wing of the party by cutting international aid.
Well,
as far as I'm concerned.
You'll be glad to know that the national living wage is going up 2.2% to a whole £8.91, which is about 4 times what you earn, Jimmy.
It's a bit more than it's considerably more than I'm making now, mate. That's for sure.
So tell me about this. Did they actually cut? No, obviously they didn't cut the national living wage, but they cut what it was going to be.
Yeah, they cut the recommendation. It's going in at 2.2%.
So that's a political decision, is it?
Yeah, it should have been
5.6, mate.
Should have been up £9.30 or something like that. But the way he worded it, it was like that was the figure that the people that decide what the figure should be had come up with, and it isn't. As Jimmy says.
He's a snake oil salesman, mate. Come on, he was a city broker. He could sell sand to the Arabs, but he probably sold a hell of a lot more shares to the Arabs than he ever sold sand.
He's certainly very smooth with his delivery, isn't he?
Are they getting worried about Scotland? Yes, they are. Scotland was mentioned twice. Barnett formula consequentials to Scotland, 2.4 billion increase. Now, I didn't catch how long that period was over, but that is not going to be an annual figure. 4 city growth deals in Scotland.
Oh God, this is what we can expect more of, isn't it? Free ports and city deals.
Yeah. Freeport's got mentioned the other day, actually, didn't they? There's also a fund. Well, housing's getting 7.1 billion, which is I made lots of notes here, too many. They've got a fund called a Levelling Up Fund of 4 billion. And he said, what he actually said after it was, we've got a Levelling Up Fund of 4 billion, and local communities and blah, blah, blah will all have to be in agreement. And your MP has to agree to where you're going to spend the money. Now, think about what that actually means.
Yeah, all right, I know. And what about the fact that how far do you think 4 billion goes across 55 million people?
It doesn't go anywhere, mate. But it's, the fact that the MP agreeing thing, it smacks of centralisation of, or another step down the road of centralisation of power to London again, doesn't it?
Well, it's control, isn't it? Central control. And it's a way of your MP being able to stand up at the next election and say, look what I did for you. Yeah.
It's like these dumbass Edinburgh councillors, mate, who are too stupid to actually achieve anything. But then come the next election, they'll tell you they've got a couple of pelican crossings put in and a zebra crossing put in. So
shut down the road through the middle of links.
Exactly. I stick with me because look at what you've got: 2 pelican crossings and a zebra.
Oh, and look, we've closed the road across the Braids as well. I'm sure that worked.
Of what?
Aye, the road across from Liberton to Comiston Road, the Braids Road.
They've closed it.
Yep.
Why?
Oh, part of
that. No, it's not that one that shut, Stuart. It's Braid Road itself. It's Braid Road that they've shut off because too many people were actually using that.
Instead of Comiston Road, the straight one.
Aye, because Comiston Road, they've put all these ludicrous bollards and shut up so that people can sit. who's going to cycle home up Comiston Road? You'd have to be a bloody masochist. But they've got it's single traffic now, so people were cutting up Braid Road, so they've just shut it off completely.
Great fun. I think we've done that to death. I mean, I've no doubt that the minutiae will come out over the next 24 hours, and we'll no doubt have a wee bit longer chat about it tomorrow.
Laura Kunsberg will be spinning like a spinny thing the day, telling us how wonderful Rishi is, but no too wonderful, because she's still kind of Boris's best pal, isn't she?
Aye, well, let's just call her best pal instead of any of the other accusations that have been levelled at her.
I think she's a wee bit too short for Boris, mate. It'd be like trying to date Kylie.
I think we should move on at this point.
All right.
To the spat. Let's just leave it at a spat. I think that Pete Wishart has opened up with his blog. He tweeted today how upset he was and referred to Wings Over Scotland as vile. I have to say, how upset he was by these yes supporting bloggers attacking the yes movement. In fact, these yes supporting bloggers have been attacking the SNP, but Pete seems to think they're one and the same.
Aye.
Opinions on that, James?
Well, I was interested. I didn't catch all of it. I'm blocked by Mr. Wishart on Twitter, so I can only catch bits and bobs, as you know. But I was interested that he was hinting that Twitter and indie Twitter ought to be a positive space where these bloggers should be banned from. Interesting that Pete Wishart seems to have set himself up as censor-in-chief. I mean, he's inane, he's boring, he's dull. His writing's about as entertaining as his dress sense, and that's awful. So when people who write well, and he's want to censor them because they didn't agree with him, I have very little time for him. I think he's part of the past. He should maybe sort of sell it with Dougie Vipond and go back on tour again or something like that, because his relevance to Scottish politics is finished as far as I'm concerned. The quicker we get rid of clowns like that, the better.
But he seems to block anybody that questions what he says.
You're not allowed to disagree with him.
I mean,
he's a man.
But the row is all about Pete Wishart claiming in his blog that, yes, he's now going to explain to everybody, all us impatient yesers, what his alternative to a refusal for a Section 30 order was going to be. And it boils down to walking out of a Commons committee.
But that, I mean, if you're in a Commons committee, you get to ask questions. You can cause all sorts of mayhem with the right questions.
Aye, but Pete doesn't want mayhem being caused, mate. As Stuart said, his supposed secret plan to sort out Boris if Boris says no again was an absolute damp squid. But I mean, seriously, what was Maggie Thatcher's comment about Geoffrey Howe's resignation speech? Was it savage by a dead sheep? That's what happens when Wishart has a go at anybody. He's woeful. I've no idea why the SNP keep him in play. He sometimes comes out with the odd wee funny, but the only person that laughs at 90% of his stuff's him.
He's not. Well, I don't think he's very effective on camera either. He doesn't have the gravitas that you need.
Mate, I've eaten Sunday dinners that had far more gravitas and capability than Pete Wishart has. That's for sure.
So, as I say, the tweet was in response to two blogs. I think. I don't think there was a third one. Two blogs. One from Wings, which did what Wings does to the unionist press normally. He basically eviscerated the blog. He took it to pieces, step by step. The other one was an unusual blog for Peter Bell. It was, I don't mean unusual entertaining, because I'm going to say it was very entertaining, the way he wrote it, the premise he used to get the message across. So I would recommend anybody that normally reads Peter and has missed this one, or has never read Peter, go and have a look at his latest blog, because it's a good laugh. It brought a hearty smile to my face, shall we say.
I'm always criticising Peter for being a bit sort of bipolar. You know, he's one of these people that feels as though well, in fact, in this article, he has a conversation with the blog, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
And it is hilarious. I agree with you 100%. Go and read Peter A. Blog's blog today.
Peter A. Blog's bell.
But generally speaking, I've said this many times, Peter's writing goes up and down. It goes from absolutely wonderful to the next day to kind of pointless. Nobody can keep up his quality, potential quality every day. But today is better than brilliant. I think
actually one of the good things that maybe inadvertently the blog he wrote today points up is that he is aware that occasionally he falls short.
Or is over verbose.
Yes, I think it would be fair to say he's been fairly self-depreciating, which again, it's nice. It makes him real. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a cracking, what would you call it?
It's a classic. It is a classic. No, to have a conversation with the blog, and the blog was arguing back. They're arguing about grammar and predictive texting and stuff. And
well, you're making it sound boring. They didn't.
It's hilarious.
It was very funny, very entertaining.
And of
talking of good writing, guys, there's a fabulous article. I keep forgetting the last first name. Suzanne Moore used to work at The Guardian.
Aye.
Kind of got pushed out. It's on unheard.com.
Yeah.
And it's possibly the best piece I've read this year. It's fantastic. Goes into great detail about why she felt it was time to leave The Guardian and that. So if you've got to spare 20 minutes a day, have a butcher's at that.
Well, if I remember rightly, she kind of got pushed. Did the Guardian staff not actually write a letter to management?
Aye. The staff stabbed her in the back, and a few of them stabbed her in the front, but no very many. But it's a cracking read, and it really, she's one of these people, mate. She's of the left, but not part of the left, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So, and a cracking bit of writing, as I say, and it speaks a lot about what's happening here at the party as well. You know, about people being silenced, or the attempt to silence them because you didn't agree with the orthodoxy of what's being said, and only one viewpoint can be heard. I'm sorry, but in a country like ours, many viewpoints ought to be heard, and there's very few that should be silenced. We should live with almost zero censorship in this country.
I always remember the question time program that fat B from what were they called? The National.
Nick Griffin for the BNP.
When they put him on, and it was the best thing they ever did because he got ripped apart.
He got torn to shreds by both the audience and the panelists, and any credibility that he or his organisation had was down the tubes the next again.
Yeah, but the trouble is, you've got somebody like Nigel Farage who's never off.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I can't remember who pointed it out, but somebody pointed out the drop in audience share over the last 10 years of Question Time, from November 2009 to this year, and it had dropped from 8.3 million to a couple of weeks ago they had 700,000 people watching. So that shows you just what the BBC have managed to do by making it the Nigel Farage show. Yeah. They've reduced it to minority TV.
Yeah, well, more importantly, they've managed to change the country.
Talking about minorities, the Labour Party pops into my head. Unbidden. Henry McLeish in the National today.
The Henry McLeish. Well,
sure.
He's not always. We know he sits on the fence quite a lot on the SNP. He's a declared devolutionist, and he doesn't really attack the SNP very much. But anyway, his headline is Boris Johnson's waging a calculated war on Scotland, and that you can contrast his article with one by Eddie Barnes. Eddie Barnes, my goodness. I'm not going to talk about his article other than to say that it turns out he used to be an advisor for the Tory party.
To the Scottish Tory party, writing in the Times, yeah.
You'd never guess it. Every second line. He must be living in London. He certainly has got that sort of blinkered view of a unionist living in London. However, Henry McLeish, he does sum up the way he sees Boris's statement about Boris's approach to devolution and Scotland in particular. And I agree with him on the basis that when Boris apparently said devolution was a disaster in Scotland, a lot of people said, oh, that was a mistake. But I'm sorry, that was no mistake, because he doubled down. Boris doubled down over the next few days to repeat it. And,
Yeah.
Henry McLeish says, no, it is deliberate. And to some extent, he puts flesh onto the reasons why he's doing so. Because Boris Johnson is actually a follower of MEGA, which is the English version of MAGA, making America great again. He's making England great again, which is obviously based on Trump and populist policies in America. But the trouble is, by making England great again, he's upsetting everybody in Scotland and in Wales and Northern Ireland.
As is often the way with English governments, the only way to make England great again is by standing on the heads of the devolved nations.
Aye, they can't quite stand on the head of the Irish anymore, but they still get away with us.
And the Welsh. Did you read the article, Jimmy?
I quite liked Henry's piece, but I mean, I quite like Henry. I thought he was quite an entertaining character over the years. As Stuart says, he's the right fence sitter, but I didn't think he was a bad First Minister. I think he's a guy with a decent heart, and he wants the best for the country. It's just his vision of the best isn't the same as mine.
Well, if you look at what came after him.
Aye, exactly. But there's also the thing that I looked at the article and thought Henry's primary reason for writing, certainly the latter half of that, was just to distance himself from Boris and the present-day Labour Party to make sure that should any blame be getting thrown around as to what happens over the next 10 years or so, Henry's distanced himself it, so none of this hit him when it bounces off the fan.
I think what struck me most about it was his point that if they want to put a federal system on the ballot, we need to see what that federal system's going to look like. I would go further than that.
That's coming.
Well, they're going to have to put it into law then, because
there you go.
If they put it on if they put it on the ballot paper and it's not in law, why should we believe a single word of it?
Aye, well, we had that the last time with the bow.
You know, I mean, so, unless it is actually in statute, ready to go.
I got the feeling that halfway through writing this article, Henry had a phone call from Brown, just to remind him of what the official Brown position is.
Then again, I mean, until they start talking about giving legal guarantees, it's a fantasy. You will be being asked to vote on something that the English will never agree to.
Aye.
Why would they?
They've got all the federalism they need right now, because all the power lies in their hands. They're not going to hand us power. We're going to have to take it.
Well, and that's the other point, that this would be written for the English regions, not for the devolved nations.
He also said that it had to be clear and in a constitution. We didn't have a constitution, and Westminster operates specifically because we don't have a constitution. It's completely unwritten, so they can do what they want. They're not going to change that arbitrarily.
There's a list that long, you know, as long as you like, of all the reasons why devolution won't work, as long as Scotland is still inside the United Kingdom. Some kind of relationship between an independent Scotland, Ireland, whether it's united or just what we've got, and the rest of the United Kingdom, England in particular, will have to be arranged, but only after Scotland has got its own independence.
That's where it falls down in Henry's article as well. The only thing he's got to compare it to is the European Union, and you could never sell anything to the English by comparing it to the European Union.
I
No, after
always find it amusing that the only people that want a written constitution for Great Britain are parties in opposition.
Mhm. Aye, because
Nobody
when
in
you get in-
power ever
when you-
wants it.
when you get in power, you realise just how unfettered your power is, and you're like, hold it, wait a minute, I'm not going to change this. I can do what I like.
Exactly.
I mean, it's actually ludicrous. We've got a Tory party that's trying to create even more unfettered power than they already have.
Did you
The-
read the Garavelli piece?
I did, yes, for my
Was in
sins.
Tortoise, is it?
Aye.
I'd forgotten that there was a good reason not to go to court to get the right to have a referendum. And that good reason is that Westminster could come up with a law that stopped a referendum.
Well, that was the difficult bit for me in that piece. I don't see how Westminster could ever write a law, as Dani Garavelli suggests, that would ban Scotland from ever seceding.
Well, they don't have to do that. They just have to say that 92% of the population have to have brown eyes.
Aye.
And
That's the only way to do
on
it,
a
though,
Friday at 5:00,
for
everybody
it to be
agreed to
utterly
it.
ludicrous. I think there's a bigger argument for not going to court, mate, and it's Martin Keating's himself. I seen him interviewed on Indie Live the other night, and the boy's an absolute Walter Mitty Fruit Loop. He writes far better than he speaks, put it that way, but he's an absolute banger, mate. He's going to get laughed out of court.
Well, fortunately, he won't be presenting the case.
Yeah, but he's like a lot of indie crowdfunders, mate. He's raised an awful lot of money and raised an awful lot of people's hopes. And as I say, he's a Fruit Loop.
I do think, I mean, I have, shall we say, a certain dislike of Garavelli because of her attitude to the salmon thing, but she does write well.
Well, she is. Dani Garavelli and Neil Mackay are the two most annoying journalists in Scotland at the moment, because the three of us don't agree what either of them say, but they're both award-winning journalists, so they do write well.
She does write well, and I was quite glad I read it, because it reminded me. I mean, I do read the opposition press, shall we say.
It's hard not to.
Well,
90% is
yeah, but
press.
I do go to the Times and the Telegraph, and I've even been known to read the Express when it's been particularly funny.
How can you read the Express?
By ignoring anything that's got
eyes.
any article with the word Diana in it, you ignore it.
Okay. But anyway, it's on the front page every day. They used to have a rule. They had to have a Diana story on the front page of the Daily Express for the 10 years after she died.
Well, the point I was trying to make was I need to get a little bit more disciplined about reading the Yes movement, who I don't really agree with, stuff as well.
Aye.
I've kind of let some of that slip.
I think you're right, Garavelli. It was a well-written piece, but I think she's up a gum tree, I think, mate. I'm not sure that she knows quite. Oh, sorry, guys, I've got to go again. Sorry.
Oh,
see, we are good luck to you. See, there you go. Cheerio, Jimmy.
Thanks for your time, James.
Yeah.
We're just about at the end anyway, are we not?
Yes, that's a good way to end the show.
Well, seen as Jimmy's left us, we'll have to go as well. Oh, somebody knocking on the door, wanting a lift to Asda.
All right. Well, that was a good show again.
I thought it was all right. It's good having Jimmy back, I have to say. I hope the listeners agree.
We're a bit. I'm not sure we're quite as hot and cold as Peter A. Bell, but we do have every show cannot be as good quality as every other. We go up and down too.
Yes, and we apologise for that, listeners.
But it's impossible.
We'd like to be perfect all the time, but we're human.
In fact, Peter says it in his. I'm recommending Peter's article again. When he argues or has a discussion with his blog. But part of the reason why it is the way it is that if you're going to blog every day, you can't be this brilliant every day. And we are practically blogging every day. So,
well, yeah, but one day. Well, thanks for being on, Stuart. Thank you, Jimmy. I know you can't hear me, but
yeah, cheerio.
Your contribution was much appreciated. And thanks for listening, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. And we will try to continue to bring luck to our taxi driving contributor. And we'll catch up with you tomorrow, which is FMQs, of course. Cheers for now.